Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko leaves absolutely no doubt. The Sounders rule the region. Seattle Sounders is campeón. It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Overcome seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. It's Friday. I am joined by Niko Moreno. How you doing, Niko?
Doing all right. All right. Feeling a little bit more relaxed, more like we're back on MLS vibes today.
It's been a little surreal the last 2 weeks.
It has. It kind of feels like, this is going to sound dumb, but you know how the players might be coming on a high, and then can they keep that momentum? Like me, I kind of feel like I've come back down to, I'm not as like stressed in terms of what I'm going to do. I'm not as hyped up.
The world isn't watching you anymore, Niko.
That's right. Just the eyes of the world were on Seattle and on Niko. No, they were not. But they were definitely on Seattle. They were definitely on this team. But today back at training, I don't know how you felt, but I kind of feel like everything kind of simmered back down.
Yeah, I do too. One of the things, and I don't know how much time we're going to unpack the Club World Cup. We want to look forward a little bit more. But one thing, the group stage is over. 2 CONCACAF teams ended up getting out of the group. The Sounders ended up finishing, I want to say, 3rd or 4th from bottom in the total table, which I actually thought was respectable, because there was a moment there where a couple of these teams that got really blown out got ties. So Auckland City got a tie, and I was like, man, it's going to be a real bummer if the Sounders end up 32nd out of 32 teams, and they avoided that. I actually asked Steph about it today. He didn't seem to be too worried about that, but I do think there is an optics thing to just not being last.
Yeah, of course. You don't want to be that team that has to explain in context why they weren't the worst team.
Right, exactly. No. Actually, we played some really good teams, and we didn't get blown out, blah, 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 blah.
And because that would have been the narrative. And again, I don't think there's anyone that watched this tournament and could say that Seattle was the worst team. They're not even the worst MLS team. I watched the LAFC games, and I got to tell you that team is in some serious disarray.
Even though they got a point somehow against...
They got a point against... Who did they get
South American team, right? No, it wasn't.
No, I forgot who they drew with. No, yeah, I think...
Was it Fluminense?
Yeah, I think it was Fluminense, yeah. And that was a game that they also didn't look apart. It's interesting because I swear that... And I don't want to blame Steve, and we don't got to get into this, but ever since he, talked about leaving and stuff, the team has kind of digressed, and they don't really feel like they're out there to just...
I do think that there's, not to, it's someone else's business, I suppose, but
yes.
I don't know what the point of announcing that you're going back to Germany for not even like a specific job. You're just like, I'm bouncing at the end of the season. I'm not quite sure... I guess there's a world where that works out, but it seems like that's one of those things where it's a little bit unnecessary. I suppose it's possible that he just wanted to get ahead of the news cycle, that he kind of felt like it was going to come out regardless. But I don't know.
Yeah, and it was against Flamengo. Now I remember it was against Flamengo. Definitely a game that they were outplayed in just about every facet of that game. And the craziest part is how little fight they had. David Martinez La Perla is on this huge decline, and it's not just his game, it's his attitude. The dude looks disinterested, just not locked in, and like you said, because maybe is it the news, is it the current, like atmosphere in the team? I don't know, but the team looks in disarray. So going back to the main point, I feel like Seattle, they weren't even the worst MLS team, definitely not the worst team in this tournament, and that's something to be proud of, specifically talking about an LAFC team that has spent a lot of cash. They've had all of this like early highlights on who they were going to be this season. So that's interesting.
I would say for most disappointing CONCACAF team, Pachuca has to be up there, right? I mean, they also went winless in a much easier group. They ended up losing to Al Ain yesterday, who came in as sort of one of the teams that had very low expectation. Probably the team that had, maybe not the lowest, Auckland City, probably below them. The team from South Africa maybe was a little bit lower. But Al Ain got blown out to Juventus. They lost 6-0 to Juventus. And then they beat Pachuca, who is a good Liga MX team, who's a team that won CONCACAF Champions League, who maybe it adds credence to the food poisoning story against Columbus Crew, but still, it's a I think they've got to be. That's a disappointing one, I think.
Yeah, look, I don't know much. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know a lot about Al Ahly, because I really don't.
Right.
But Al Hilal, watching their games, they have talented players. First of all, I don't know where I saw the graphic where.
Oh, that's who Al Hilal is. Who they lost to yesterday.
Yes,
that's right.
Al Hilal. Yeah. And it was 2-0. But this was the exact same team that drew against Real, right? I think they got a result against Real Madrid. And you look at their lineup, and Malcolm's a player that a lot of South Americans know. Leonardo's a good player. I mean, this is a team that I don't know if you want to call it that way, but that Saudi money, sometimes takes you.
Al Hilal, no, I got him totally confused with the UA with the UAE team, and you're right. Al Hilal actually has a pretty decent roster, and although I don't know, watching the game yesterday, I was surprised at how relatively slow that game just did not strike me as interesting as I thought it would be.
No, but you know what? You know who made me realize that they were probably better than they were? It was my son. I'm watching the game with him, and he loves his FIFA, right? Yeah. And he's like, "Whoa, Dad, is that that Atletico guy?" And I was like, "Who?" He said, "That's Lottie, the right back, the left back." And I was like, "No, that can't be him." Oh, yep, that's him. So this teams, they came out and they went and they got some talented players. So yes, but I'm with you. Mexican teams are always kind of expected to do well in the sort of tournaments.
Yeah.
Monterrey's been up there before in the Club World Cup.
Did get out of the group.
Monterrey did.
And then who was the other Mexican team that was in the tournament?
No, that was it. It was just two.
Just two.
Yeah, because Leon got...
Because we had three MLS teams. That's right.
Yep.
Well, I don't know. I do think this tournament, we talked about it a little bit earlier this week on No Sadietes, but I thought I think this was a good proof of concept, actually. I actually came out of the group stage feeling pretty good. I feel like if there's a concern I have, though, it's that in 2029, I think it's going to be a challenge for MLS to get back into it. And the Sounders should be targeting this as something that they want to participate in on a regular basis. And they've got a lot of work to do, I think, internally as a organization, mostly to do with money. When it comes to, if they want to compete in this tournament, they're going to have to spend some money that right now it doesn't look like they're willing to spend. And I bring it up because the salary numbers from MLS Players Association came out this week. The Sounders are spending about $18 million in guaranteed compensation. That puts them right around the middle of the table, which isn't bad. It's actually one spot higher than where they were last year. But the difference is that a lot of the teams that are below them have spent transfer fees that the Sounders just haven't spent. And at some point, the Sounders have to start spending money again if they want to be competitive.
Absolutely, and this is something that you and I have touched on, and that plays is probably coming from making their guys whole, like a guy like Jackson Reagan that just got that big up on his contract.
A lot of it was Ryan Kent getting almost $1 million, essentially replacing Paul Area. Now, to the Sounders' ownership credit, that's money that they have to. That's actual cash they have to spend.
Absolutely.
So it does count, but that accounts for some of their increase. Albert Rusnak got a nice bump. Jordan got a nice bump. These were things we kind of knew. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but that's exactly what I wanted to just kind of point out. I'm not trying to sit here and criticize the fact that these guys are getting the money they deserve. I'm criticizing that, if anything was a realization for me, an epiphany moment, if you will, after this Club World Cup, is that the Seattle Sounders have a fantastic base.
Yes.
And they have a core group of players that works. And they've been able to get guys that are very good. But two things were highlighted. One is the fact that if you want to compete at the highest level, you're going to have to get out there and spend some transfer fees and really bring in some players that are difference makers. And I say that because your designated players, they didn't quite perform to the way you wanted them to perform. And look, I understand that you were competing way over your own weight class, and I totally understand that. But there were specific moments in this tournament where I was like, man, Pedro's not really playing, right?
I mean, one of their designated players played all 3 games.
Exactly. The other one was injured. Albert was in there. He got a goal, but, he wasn't.
I actually thought Albert acquitted himself well. We can talk about that if you want. But I actually thought Albert did what you need him to do.
Yeah.
They just didn't have enough talent on the field to compete on a whole. Like, there were moments where you could see a Paul Rothrock beating a guy. Even Pedro had some moments.
Yep.
But nobody on the offensive side was consistently creating danger. No one was putting opponents on their heels. And, I think Obed and Christian did a really amazing job, frankly, controlling the midfield. But the Sounders just did not pose enough danger in the attack.
And that's what I'm hoping that this tournament did, is maybe open some eyes and say, look, we played great if, I'm the front office. But did we maybe miss an opportunity? Had we had one more piece, it would have been great to just made history, had been another MLS team to go through the next round. Because look, Atleti ended up being left on the road, and Botafogo was the one team that you looked really good against in the second half, and they were the ones that went through. So I'm hoping that it gives you a vision, an idea, a universe where you can dream and saying, look, next time, if we have a little bit more, talent on the field, how much of a difference would that make? So, we don't want to go too far into the Club World Cup, but I do feel like it's a good point to get us going in a chronological sort of way. And because it does matter. It does matter. We have the summer transfer window coming up. You and I have both, have our, thoughts about, the type of player that you might be able to go get. So it's all put together. It's all connected.
It is all connected, and it's going to be interesting to see if they come up with some money for this summer, because you and I have both heard that the budget for signing a U22, and that does seem to be where most of the focus is just not. There wasn't that much money. I did hear this week that they feel a little more confident about signing someone. I don't know how much they're going to spend on that someone, but they do. I did for the first time hear a little bit more confidence about just being able to bring somebody in that they are happy with. So we'll see what ends up happening. The window opens, I think, in a couple weeks.
July 1st.
So very soon, in a week, less than a week.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting if they can actually get someone. Hopefully they don't wait until the very end of the window to do it. That would just be unnecessarily stressful. I would like to not have to talk about how they haven't spent any transfer fees in the last X number of windows. It would be nice if they just went ahead and did it.
Yeah, but we have said, I think, in this exact same show that the team has tried to sign.
They have.
Players that just have come off the negotiating table without a player.
Right.
But they've attempted to go and get somebody.
They are doing stuff. It's just at some point you want to see them actually push it across the line. But going forward, they come out of this tournament, I think it seems counterintuitive, but they're on a 5-game losing streak. But everyone seems to feel like they have positive momentum, and I think that it's not hard to understand why. It's because they played well during the last 3 games. I think they exceeded, if not their own expectations, I think they exceeded a lot of people's expectations in terms of their ability to be competitive, especially in the Botafogo match. I mean, they dominated the second half of that game. They were a little unlucky not to get at least a point out of that game. They probably deserved to win that game on balance. I don't know that you could say the same thing about the next 2 games, but I think most people thought of those next 2 games as, let's just not get embarrassed. And they were not in any way, shape, or form embarrassed in those 2 games. But they come out of that game with what they feel like is some positive momentum, and they're going to be hosting Austin FC, a team who is right behind them in the standings, who's even with them on points. They've played more games, and they played one more game than the Sounders. Sounders have a better goal difference. An Austin team who has not been particularly good. We'll do a full scouting report on them in the second segment, but let's focus right now on the Sounders. They are unfortunately quite shorthanded, especially in defense, where John Bell is suspended, Nuhu is suspended, Stu Hawkins is hurt, Kim Keehee is hurt, Yamar Gonzalez is hurt, and Leo Burney, who is not even technically on the first team roster, he is on full season loan. They could have theoretically called him up. He is also hurt. There are a lot of injuries at what I think we both would have called probably their deepest position, to the point where it looks like Alex Roldan is going to be starting at center back. That is.
If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Is not ideal.
That's not ideal. It almost seems like, the start of a joke, or I don't know. I mean, it's very bizarre. I can't remember the last time that one specific position or group got hit that bad. In so many ways, some self-inflicted wounds, I will say, but at the same time, far from ideal when you got Brandon Vasquez, who's the Austin FC's leading scorer, coming to town.
All-star Brandon Vasquez.
That's right. Don't forget that. MLS All-Star Brandon Vasquez coming into town, the $10 million man. So it's difficult. Alex, and it sounded like Stephen Fry gave him a vote of confidence.
He seemed really confident in Alex. I mean, maybe he's just blowing smoke, but he seemed to really, he almost I don't know, the other option, I suppose, would have probably been putting Cody Baker back there, or hell, I suppose maybe you put João Paulo back there if you really get crazy. But it seemed like Steph was really comfortable with putting Alex back there.
Yeah, he talked about, and he's right? And whenever he's playing outside back and there's a transition moment and either Jackson or Yamar get cut up, he has to cover those inside channels. He has the physicality and IQ to play the position, but I do worry. I think that a lot, and he's hyping up his teammate, and I love it. I absolutely love it. But coming back to reality, center back's a difficult position when it comes to timing. When it comes to
position.
No, it's difficult. Getting out of the back is different, and we've seen players with issues even when they just switch sides. Imagine playing and receiving the ball in different parts of the field. We talked about set pieces. He kind of mentioned that he's not so worried because you can move players, and I get that, but you're losing one more guy that can defend aerial attacks, because that's not Alex's strengths. So there's a lot of components that lead for concern, or they should, give you some sort of concern. My question to Brian was, how do you prevent services in the box? And I think that's where Seattle's going to have to put all their effort, is not allowing.
Control the midfield, and maybe you don't have to worry about so much what's going on at center back.
Absolutely. Possession, defending, basically. You're going to possess the ball. You're not going to let Austin get on the ball. When they do, you probably want them to go internally and not have wide open spaces to cross the ball inside. But it's going to be a difficult task. But, Alex, he's done it. It's not ideal. Jackson Regan himself hasn't looked fully 100% just yet.
Regan looked great in the Club World Cup. He hasn't. I would agree with you that he hasn't looked his best in MLS play this year, but I thought he looked really good defensively in the Club World Cup.
He was by far the best defender in the back,
right? And I would
for sure.
And I know I don't know how much to take away from this, but Alex did play center back for like 15 minutes against PSG, and he looked like he knew what he was doing. We'll see how that translates to an MLS game. I think the good thing is that you would expect him to be good in the build-out. There's no reason he can't. He should be good with the ball at his feet. He might actually be better with the ball at his feet. So if the Sounders, and so in that sense, it's a good thing that this game's at home. It's a good thing that Austin is not a team that wants to possess the ball a whole lot. So it might not, it might help that they are able to, sort of do a lot more rest defending, as they say, where it's essentially defending with the ball. And, I could see this maybe working out okay, at least for a game. And then hopefully you'll get John Bell back next week. And hopefully it sounds like Kim might be a little bit ahead of Yamar, but I don't even know if either one of them are going to be back for the next game.
I would not bet on it. I'll tell you that. I will not bet on either one of those guys coming back. Obviously, you get Nuhu and Jay Bell, which is an upgrade of what you have right now. But you are going to miss those guys, especially for some of the tougher games coming up. I really do think that. There's also going to be an adaptation time for those guys to get back into game rhythm.
Yeah.
And, so you are probably putting those guys not in full fitness for at least 2 more weeks.
I will say I am looking forward to seeing Reed Baker-Whiting at left back. It'll be interesting to see how they use them. If they sort of try to cover a little bit more by not, almost using Reed as a third center back and less as a fullback. Because even though Reed's natural position is not center back, obviously, you might just feel better about having sort of 3 guys out there and allowing Reed and Alex to kind of defend more like fullbacks, interior fullbacks, and less like center backs. I don't know if that makes it almost like as wide center backs rather than fullbacks. Because it might help a little bit in terms of just the numbers and shutting down that space, because you would imagine that's going to be some problems. So it'll be fascinating. One thing we did look at, or we asked Brian about, was whether or not they thought about bolstering the roster with a center back from Defiance. Now, I looked into this. It was a little bit more complicated than just call up your best center back from Defiance. For one, Stu Hawkins and Leo Burney have been playing a lot of center back for the Defiance.
Right.
The other starting center back is Yamada, who is actually not even on loan to the Sounders. He's on loan to the Defiance, and he's an international. So he's not really, for all practical purposes, he was not eligible. And then after him, you've got Tino Lopez and Damian Alvarez, who have each played, I believe, 1 game this year. Or maybe a couple games. But Tino Lopez has not been healthy this year. Damian Alvarez is a draft pick who played at Seattle U last year, also played at Ballard FC, and only recently got his first playing time, which I think is more just for he hadn't really been impressing down in Defiance. So I think understandable why the Sounders didn't call up any of the options, in part because there weren't a lot of great options to call up.
So all in all, the Sounders are kind of making soup with whatever they could find on the fridge. So that is difficult. And yeah, Yamada was the guy that everybody was kind of looking at. I
Right.
saw him talking to Kim yesterday for quite a long time, and I did a quick open space for people to just chat with me, and it was brought up, and I kind of did think that was the case.
I mean, it would have. Yeah, it would have. I mean, I think in a perfect world, you do call him up just. Even if you don't start him, just to have another center back on the roster. But the mechanics of getting him into the roster are pretty complicated. Like I said, I think they would have to work out a loan agreement with Vissel Kobe to move him. So which technically might not even be possible since he's since it's not a transfer window right now. Although I suppose they could have theoretically planned. I mean, I guess if they really wanted to, they could have figured out a way to do that during the 10-day window. But then the other problem is that they don't have an international roster spot open for him. So they would have had to acquire an international roster spot just to get him on the roster for a day. And at that point, it's like, what are we doing here?
No. There's no need for that. And like I said, you'll get Jay Bell and Nuhu back. And either way, the reality is that you need to get Yeimar that's healthy, and you need to get a Kim that's healthy to just help you in the next couple of games where you face Columbus. That is Columbus, of course. Sporting Kansas City, who has a pretty decent attack these days, and Colorado, who as well, they have a very good attacking players. So it's going to be a tough task ahead for the team, but with what you have, it makes sense to not do all of these moves to get a guy like Yamada in your roster. The other place where there might be some interesting, I don't want to call it rotation, but possibilities or decisions is going to be in the wing play. You and I have both talked about Pedro de la Vega. I have been probably the most concerned and the most active towards asking why it is that Pedro has not been getting more than 60 minutes. He has 90 minutes one time this entire season. Why in the last 5 games, I believe he started 2 games in of the Club World Cup. So there was definitely something for me where I wanted to ask Brian what it is that he's not getting out of Pedro. There is a lot of competition there, and specifically with Jesus Ferreira, who for all accounts came in as a forward, but Brian seems to like him at the winger position. Obviously, under this system, when you get your fullback as high as the Sounders like to get their fullbacks, specifically the right side, whether it's Alex or Kalani, Ferreira's going to tuck inside. He's going to, he has great IQ. He's a guy that is very solid on his passing. He obviously has a bit of a bad relationship with the goal at this specific time. I know that a lot of people were asking me and coming at me about that chance that he missed against Paris Saint-Germain, and that's one that he wishes he has back. I know that he would have loved to put that in the back of the net, but he kind of panics in that specific moment. So, when it comes to Pedro, he is statistically, and I said this to Brian himself, the most productive player in terms of goal contributions in all competitions. As a winger player, he's the most productive. So it was kind of mind-boggling to me that chasing a game against PSG, he wasn't the first guy that you brought on. But, finally, this week, he gave me the reasoning behind some of those things, rather than being short and a little condescending with me like he was during the Club World Cup post-game conference. But, that's all good and well. He has a decision to make. He made it, and I don't really agree with it. But I am a little bit concerned about the amount of minutes that you're getting out of your DP. I've said this 1,000 times about a bunch of players. You're killing his confidence, and to me, it always feels like you do need to go with your guys and give him enough time, enough confidence for them to either play themselves out of that starting role. But I know that you have other thoughts, Jeremiah, so I'm excited to hear from you.
So I am definitely sympathetic to the idea that he should be getting more minutes based on his play. I mean, the reality is that you're right. If you look at all competition minutes, I do think he's been the most productive player, even on a per 90-minute basis within MLS. If you compare him to Ryan Kent, Georgie Manungu, Jesus Ferreira and Paul Rothrock, he is right there with them in terms of production and in terms of expected goals and expected assists. And you can kind of go through the numbers on a per 90 basis in MLS play, and he stacks up really well. Like nobody, but the bigger problem is that no one's really running away with the job. And so I think it's an interesting balancing act that Brian is trying to do, where he's trying to give minutes to all of these players and hoping kind of one of them hits. I do think it's interesting, though, that Paul Rothrock seems to be the one who is most embedded himself into the lineup. And he's the one player who started on both sides. He's this player who started at multiple positions because he's also started as a wingback. Now, I think part of that is this sort of unquantifiable X-Dog kind of aspect where he just looks like...
I like that.
He just looks like a guy who is putting in his effort all the time. And I'm a huge Paul Rothrock fan. I'm not here to diminish what Paul Rothrock has done. But there is a reality that for all of that effort and for all of the moments that he has, and he does have some good moments, he's not producing either. He's not out there putting up big goal and assist numbers. He's not even if you look at the defensive metrics, Pedro is ahead of him on almost every defensive metric. And so there's some kind of unquantifiable aspect that just comes down to a coach's eye that I think is getting him into the lineup and is keeping Pedro from being a more consistent starter. And one narrative I did want to push back on the whole Pedro de la Vega thing is there seems to be this growing attitude that he is just sort of on the outs, like he is in the doghouse, that he's not getting playing time. And I will say, it doesn't look like he's going to start this week. He didn't play in the most recent game. That's bad. I'm not here to defend that decision. But I also think we can overstate the degree to which he's fallen out of favor. He started 2 games ago. He came off the bench against Botafogo. He has been he's been getting minutes. I would be a little surprised if he doesn't get some minutes this week against Austin. He could be back in the starting lineup next week. So I think the degree to which he's fallen off is maybe been overstated, but I will agree with you at the same time that from a designated player, you want him to be, I guess my point is, I want him to force Brian Schmetzer to start him by producing. And that's the thing that's been frustrating to me, is that all of these players have had moments. Ryan Kent had a 2 or 3 game run where he looked unbeatable or like he was going to be a designated player. Georgie Manungu, I know there's a lot of frustration over him not having the final product, but even against Atletico and against PSG, he had moments where it's like, no, there's not very many players in the world that can beat guys off the dribble the way that he can. So we're seeing something, but you put all these players together and you have like one really great player. We just aren't seeing it enough on a consistent basis, and it's not always showing up in the end product, and that's what's frustrating, I think.
Yeah, and it is definitely a busy positioning room, right? Especially when you're moving Ferreira into that position.
Right,
so
exactly.
That has a lot.
Looks like that might be where we're going.
And that has a lot to do with the fact that Georgie's not getting minutes, because you're right. I mean, I love to see Georgie, especially coming off the bench against tired legs and giving him 50 minutes to go. I don't feel like a lot of players have that ability to just kind of spark change a game, and he has that ability. So moving forward is going to be interesting how that works, because man, I hear a lot of people talking about how good Ryan Kent was over this last 3 games in the Club World Cup, and I don't get it. I missed that.
Yeah, he had a couple of moments where it almost came off.
No,
like he had. I want to say there was one play in particular against PSG where he beat his guy on the dribble, and I think he had
Ferreira up, but he makes a bad pass.
Yes, and he left it short.
Yes.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I mean. You have to be more effective on the ball. And look, I'm South American, man. Nobody's going to enjoy you shaking the sockets of somebody more than I do. But at the end of the day, you got to be productive with the next pass.
Right.
I've always said this thing that I will never forget about the late Siggy Smith, is that he used to say, there's players that are we're like right. He's that player, right? He's like, he made a bad pass. There are those players that they look really good at moments, and then all of a sudden they make a bad decision, and that doesn't make you a great player necessarily. So, all to say that I feel like Georgie maybe should be getting some minutes over, Ryan Kent. And I get it. I mean, I know that that's not what people want to hear, because Ryan Kent is your commodity, you're a pedigree player. And I do hope that he continues to grow within, this team and it's out there more consistently. But, I feel like also Georgie should be in the loop a little. So it's difficult decisions for Brian.
I think what it comes down to for me is, again, I love Paul Rothrock. I'm a little concerned that he has sort of become the default starter at some sort of like plug and play starter. And I guess maybe it's because he is seen as a little bit more versatile. But, this is a whole thing, but I would urge people to go read Brian McKay's story on Sounder at Heart, where he talks about how the Sounders system doesn't seem to be getting the most out of seemingly talented players. And one of the things that he highlights is Brian really likes to play natural wingers as opposed to inverted wingers. And that's because the Sounders have really fallen in love with the cutback pass.
Yes.
And that is a very effective way to score, but it's not so effective that it can be your only sort of... It almost seems like the Sounders' entire system is set up to get that cutback pass, and that's a fine thing if you're going to have one main focus, but it's almost become their myopic focus at times. And I think that they've set up their team so much to get that pass that it's sort of not allowing them to be as effective in other parts of the field. We can get into that a whole nother time, but I do think it's sort of like illustrative of the winger problem.
Yeah, there's two great points there. One, it reminds me something that I wanted to say to one of your comments, and it is the fact that, and we've both known this, and it's not a criticism towards Brian, but he tends to marry certain players, and he there's a specific sort of player he wants out on the field, and Paul has all of the Brian's metric checklist, everything you want, right? Tenacity, effort, high engine, duality play in terms of defense and offense, and I like him. I really do.
And I think what Brian really likes about him is he knows who he's going to get.
Yes,
and I understand coaches want predictability, they want reliability. And Paul gives them that, but I think that sometimes what they're losing is dynamism, a little bit of dynamism.
Yeah, and he creates a lot of havoc, and at times a little bit uncontrolled havoc.
Yeah.
With I think other players, maybe you might be able to get a little bit more polished, finished product, and I feel like that's what maybe you're missing out of Pedro. And a lot of the narrative surrounding Pedro is also that he's very undisciplined in his movement and he gets too far inside. But that is what makes a lot of teams click. So it goes back to your system. As a I don't know what you call it, theory. Mm-hmm. That the theory about the system is because look, if you look at other teams like even Botafogo, Savarino was playing on the left side, but he had free will to come in and outside of those channels. He had no pocket. He was all over the field, and that's hard to defend. So can the Sounders maybe do better with the talent that they have? It's a conversation that we have for sure, and I feel like the system is one of those things that maybe is not quite working.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a good place to call a break. We're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit more of a preview on the Austin FC game. You're listening to Nos Ariates.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Ariates, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit centerbacks.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Ariates, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Sounder at Heart's Club World Cup coverage is being sponsored by realtor Marnie O'Shan. Yes, that's my sister. With 20 plus years in marketing, business, and negotiation, and an MBA from UW, Marnie O'Shan helps homebuyers and investors make smart, informed real estate decisions. From first homes to 1031 exchanges and developmental deals, she offers expert guidance backed by financial insight and local market knowledge. Expertise in new construction and well-versed on all types of real estate, she'd like to talk to you about your goals and is here to help you move forward with confidence. While I'm obviously not an impartial observer, I can tell you that I have referred both friends and family to Marnie, and she's helped them get what they were looking for at prices they wanted to pay. You can reach her at marnieoshanhomes.com. That's MarnieOshanhomes.com, or email her at marnie@windermere.com. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So we got a game against Austin coming up here on Saturday at 7:30. I would say it's a pretty big game. The Sounders, even though they are a little shorthanded in the back, they are pretty close to full strength otherwise. Jordan should be available even if he's not starting. This is an opportunity for the Sounders to show whether or not they actually, like, which team are they, I think is kind of one of the big things. But you have crunched some tape on Austin FC. What have you made of them?
It is your God, this is gonna sound terrible, but it feels a lot like the Niko team in Dallas that was had a lot of difficulty. Let's put it that way. It had a lot of difficulties creating chances. So they're one of the lowest expected teams in terms of goals, expected goals. They move the ball extremely slow. They play out of a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3, depending on what Niko Steves is kind of looking at. Brandon Vasquez clearly is the main player of what they want to do. He's the top leading scorer. He's the guy that is consistently getting involved in the attack. They like to cross the ball early, plenty of times to try to use his height. They got some really good, in my opinion, spark plugs coming off the bench, and a guy like El Soldado Hader O'Brien. They push their fullbacks very selectively, but when they do, they try to overload you on that side where that fullback comes up. They do struggle on getting the ball back at midfield. They can retrieve and get a lot of players behind the ball, but I feel like their pressing and their active defending tends to be easy for teams to kind of play around. Their best game, I think, kind of came against New York City FC just recently. They get a good win, but I feel like the mentality and the identity of this team is still kind of being written, but they are a team that wants to play off the back foot with a mid block. They don't necessarily need the ball in possession.
No, they're below 50%. They're one of the lowest possession teams in the league.
And they want to play off of the counter. They want to use a lot of their speed, but they just don't do it very effectively. So what I'm here to say is that they are a mid-table, right where they're at about in the standings, with the potential at best to be a surprising counter team against Seattle. They're going to want to build off of set pieces. They're going to want to build off of restarts. They're going to want to kind of cheat their way into getting a goal in the back of the net, and then they're going to try to put a lot of numbers behind the ball.
Yeah, they're also one of the lowest. It's for a team that spent almost $30 million, or they spent about $30 million in the last 2 transfer windows, and they have 15 goals to show for it. 15 goals would put them on pace for less than 30 goals, like 25 goals for the season, which would be among the least offensive teams in MLS history. They are just not a team that has been very dangerous going forward. That said, they are in a nice little run of form. They've won 2 in a row. They're 2-1-5 or 2-1-2 in their last 5. So they've been able to string some results together. And they started really strong from a defensive perspective. Then they sort of fell apart a little bit in the middle of the a couple months ago. They kind of started to fall apart defensively, but then they seem to have regained themselves. And they've only allowed 21 goals, which is among the league leaders. So I don't know. It's a team that's hard to know what to make of in some ways, other than they don't play real exciting soccer, and
they do not.
And that has not been a recipe for success for the Sounders. It's kind of a team that the Sounders have struggled against a little bit this year. A team that is not going to come out there and press and try to play. It's kind of like a more boring version of Minnesota United in some ways.
Yes, and less effective. They don't have the eliteness, I think, and
the open field ability that Minnesota United
100%. And I feel like they really lack a creative player.
I'll tell you, when they spent all this money in the offseason, I thought, man, they've put a lot of money into wingers and forwards, and they don't seem to have any creative midfielders, and that seems to have kind of been their problem. They don't do much in terms of chance creation. But hey, that's not my problem.
Look, even Gallagher's playing the line up. He was mainly a fullback for this team in the past, but they just don't have anybody to really give them a lot of width. So he provides that for Austin. I would say that if there's 3 players to look at, is of course Brandon Vasquez. He's their goal scorer. He's the guy that does it all for them in the final end. I think that Pereira is the one that controls the ball the most. He's the one that puts balls through. He's the one that opens up the field. He can be a guy that's rangy, but not necessarily a guy to be scared of. I would put Usuni in there because of what he's supposed to provide, but he also hasn't been very productive or effective. He's one of those guys that creates a lot of danger, but doesn't have a lot to show for it when it comes to the stat sheet. So I would say him, and then Stuver. Stuver will keep you in every single game. You got to give that guy credit because he is so good at the one-on-one opportunities. I think he reacts very good to mid-range shots. I think that he has a lot of control of the box when it comes to set pieces. I really like Stuver, and he seems to be a guy that if he's playing well and he can provide the team confidence that they're not going to get scored on, that's when Austin plays their better soccer.
Yeah, and they are, like you said, they've scored a fair number of goals on set pieces. They are a team that can hurt you. This is not an easy matchup by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, unfortunately, sort of a recipe for not a very exciting game, and it's going to be on the Sounders to sort of create the action. And so in that way, maybe it is a good test for them because we will see how much progress they really made against during this Club World Cup. Because one of the things Steph said I thought was kind of interesting is one of the things they did well in this tournament was that they played their game. They didn't just drop back into a shell and play for the counter. They went out and they pressed. They wanted to have the ball a fair amount of the time. And one of the things that maybe helped them was that nobody was worried. Like their opponents were not just sitting back either and absorbing pressure. And that has kind of been one of the things that Sounders have struggled with this year is teams that ask them to sort of make the action. And I think it's going to be really imperative that the Sounders press is active and is sort of generating this, is kind of forcing the action a little bit. Breaking down teams is difficult, and that's even more concerning now that me and you are kind of having this conversation. Is that's when you need your best 1v1 attackers out there. It does seem like a game where Pedro de la Vega might be useful. Yes, and that's very interesting because
let's say that he doesn't play as we expected to start off the game, I would think he's one of your early substitutions.
You would hope.
But that's when Seattle tends to, yes, they're a good second half team. The Browns is always good second half teams. But if you let a goal slip in, because right now you are a team that's lacking on defenders, and there's a set piece moment or there's a transition moment, that's when things get dicey. So I would love to sit here and tell you that I'm confident that the Sounders are gonna. This is not one of those games where I'm looking at. This is they're gonna win. They gotta win. They have everything in line to win. I don't see it necessarily this way. I think this is gonna be a difficult game. I think they're gonna make it sloppy. It's gonna look a lot like that Dallas game.
I think so too. I mean, this is a game where I think if you can get a 1-0 win, you take that and you just run to the bank with it. This is not a style points type of. This is not a statement game, but I will say the danger in this one is there are, I think, outside of certain communities, I think for the most part, Sounders fans are pretty happy with the way they acquitted themselves in this tournament, and there is some positive energy around this team. There was good crowds. It was fun, but I think it could turn pretty quickly if they come out of this break playing poorly. They've got 2 home games. It's very imperative that they get results out of these games. They cannot afford to drop too many points from these home games, because this is sort of like these are important. So they've got Austin and they've got Columbus. I think of those 2 games, you probably got to look at Austin as the one that you're more likely to get points from, or to get 3 points from. And so that does add some impetus, I think, to this. There will be grass on the field, so I don't know. Maybe
that's a good point.
That will maybe be a good thing. The players all seem to really like the surface, even if the Luis Enriquez, which I think he did sort of like say he thought it was too hard, and there were some criticisms of the grass from.
He said the ball hopped like a bunny.
Yeah. But I think he's also, to his defense, he's comparing it to, look, if you're telling us this is the highest level of competition, the grass needs to be at the highest level of the competition. And so the Sounders are looking at this like, hey, it's better than what we normally play on, whereas Luis Enrique is like, it's not as good as what we play on in Champions League, and so that's what we're comparing it to. That said, I think the best case scenario for the grass is probably that it sticks around for the game against the Crew, which is on July 6th, but then after that, the weekend, the band, the singer is coming, and I would imagine that it won't survive past that.
Yeah, and look, one of the positives that Steph talked about was, the team's build out and, some of the sequences in a few of these games. And they were able to do it in this exact same type of grass. So that could be a positive for Seattle, because Luis Enrique said the opposite. Is, look, man, for us, we could barely possess the ball because of the field. So maybe Seattle can take that advantage into Austin. But going back to Austin specifically, I didn't get through the whole game, but I was curious of how the 4-2-3-1 that Colorado played Austin against kind of would measure with Austin. And they made Navarro's life very difficult. So whether it was Musovski or at some point Jordan, there's going to have to be a lot of wing play for you to break down Austin, because Colorado did have a hard time getting services into Navarro, getting him involved into the game. And I felt like a lot of the good moments that Colorado created were off of repress moments. So, Brian, I asked him specifically about this because, look, if I'm concerned about Alex and I want to not get him as exposed, what I want to do is try to take away the services in, maybe aside from possessing the ball, maybe a high press that's effective, of course, can help you create some moments against Austin. So maybe pushing them down and limiting their ability to get out of their own third would be effective. So that's something to look at. I feel like that's something where Seattle could benefit of a guy like Ferreira. And some of the things that they did do well in the Club World Cup were there were spells where even against PSG, they were able to press him correctly and create moments. We go back to that. Yeah, we'll go back to that one. Miss. Yes. So that's what I mean. I really do think that that's where Seattle can get an edge against Austin. If those things are ineffective, it's just going to be a big, boring draw game.
Yeah. Well, let's hope. But that's probably a good place to end it on. I think we kind of emptied the notebook, so to speak. Niko, once again, thank you for doing this. We can follow you on Pulso Sports. We can follow you on Blue Sky, El Rolo NW. You, of course, are on Soccer Down Here. You're on Lobbing Scorchers. You're here. We're going to start doing a little bit more partnerships with Pulso and Sounder at Heart Video. So we'll probably get to see some more of your video on the Sounder at Heart YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber, go on there, subscribe. We are going to start trying to beef up our presence on YouTube a little bit. Anything else you want to close with, Niko?
No, just excited about the second half of the MLS season. Thank you to all of you for your constant support, your comments. Continue to help us out by sharing, subscribing. Like Jeremiah said, I have some things in line, some video things that I think are going to be interesting for the YouTube page. So go ahead and follow us there as well. But man, just thankful for you, Jeremiah, and the Sounders fan base as always.
Yeah, and if you want a little bit of a nugget to help you get you to subscribe to Sounder at Heart, we are about 40 subscribers short of 3,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us in our quest to get to 3,000 subscribers, that's maybe your call to action. This is a good time of year to get involved. We're going to have a lot of good coverage during the second half of the season. With all that said, I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Niko Moreno and our producer, Lickett. This is No Sadieta as part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, and we'll catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.